Okay, guys. First of all, thanks for Defrag for having us. My last presentation was a demo, which was a very different kind of presentation where it's very click, 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 and very salesy. So this is a totally different kind of format for me. My presentation is called Making the Entire Web Semantic, using an old concept to power new technologies. Now, before I explain what exactly that means, let me start with an assumption that everyone sort of holds, especially here at Defrag, which is cloud computing is pretty amazing, right? It's flexible, scalable, and on demand. We sort of hold this as truth to be self-evident. But I'm going to actually question that. Is that actually true? And I actually believe that cloud computing is on demand up to a point. And the reason for that is that the infrastructure is rigid and static at the provider's end. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've got the cloud user, their infrastructure is dynamic thanks to the cloud. The virtual machines that they use are going to be dynamic, so that's great. But then the provider is essentially just a data center that you are renting out as a user, which means that at a certain point, that infrastructure is rigid and static. Now, the cloud works for most cases, but when you're talking about large scale or even web scale uses, it becomes a rigid and static infrastructure. So actually, some of our guys that work at our company, 80 Legs, have backgrounds in high performance computing, and so we know a little bit about the industry. No one in HPC uses the cloud because it does not scale to their needs. So, but should we be okay with that? Because most of us don't have needs that require super scalability that is something that like a Google or Yahoo might need. But I think we can actually do better, and this is where the old technology comes in. So who here remembers grid computing? Did anyone use SETI at home? Boink? Okay, not as many hands as I thought would go up. I was trying to question the nerd quotient at Defrag if you haven't run SETI at home. But what's cool about the grid is that it really is fully on demand, which is what the cloud tries to sell itself as. The infrastructure is fully dynamic and scales well from end to end. So let me contrast that with the cloud with the same diagram. So you've got the user infrastructure, which is again dynamic. They're going to interface with the grid manager, which, although isn't dynamic, scales well. You only need a few servers to manage thousands and thousands of computers. And you have those computers which are grid nodes, and those are dynamic too because we're only using them, they only come online when we actually need them. So rather than having a data center at the back end that's providing all the compute power, we have these transient nodes that come and go as we need them. So that's fully on demand, fully dynamic all the way through, so I'm extra happy. So the advantages are with the grid versus the cloud is that it's fully on demand, it's highly scalable, and if we have the right kind of grid manager, it can have automatic provisioning. So I think one of the other presentations I talked about provisioning in a few minutes or a few hours, that can be handled automatically by a grid manager rather than the user setting it up, which is a really great feature. There is a limitation, though, in that the grid works best with highly parallelized tasks. So you can't have sort of node-to-node communication, but things that can be done in batch or can be done on single units are really great for the grid. So we have to think about, we have this highly parallelizable, super on-demand system that consists of thousands of computers all over the internet. So what can we actually do with this? So, SETI at home, fully at home, those are all research things which are great, which are useful and valuable things, but are there commercial uses? And I think the grid probably actually went through the same hype cycle, about a decade ago, where everyone thought it would be the next big thing, pervasive computing and all that, and now it's sort of in that trough where it's like, well, crap, what do we actually do with this stuff? We can't actually use it. So at 80 Legs, we were thinking, okay, we've got computers all over the internet, what are we going to do? Well, turns out we can do super massive web crawling. So that's what we do at 80 Legs. So we have the grid manager and the nodes here, and then we put this layer on top of it that is the crawl manager. So what you can do is you can send crawl instructions through the crawl manager, it sends it to the grid which distributes it, and then it sends it to the nodes which crawl the web pages. So web crawling is a valuable commercial thing that a lot of people do, more people than you might think actually. And so we have a commercial use for that. So this was actually our first aha moment, going along the theme of the conference at 80 Legs. But we had a second one actually. And that is we can make the entire web semantic. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the semantic web industry, But a big problem that they have is that they are looking at the entire web, they need to analyze it, and they don't have the horsepower or the bandwidth to do that. They've looked at cloud solutions, some guys run on the cloud, but even they only work on limited sets of data. But with a grid, you can actually look at the entire web and analyze it in a way that's cost effective for even a startup. So we've got our crawl manager, grid manager, and nodes, which is sort of what 80 legs is. And then we have this additional data we can create for the semantic application. So now what we're going to do is our crawl instructions become semantic extraction or content extraction instructions. We send that out through the grid, and now we have thousands and thousands of computers on the internet analyzing content and extracting semantic knowledge from those pages. We can do that across the entire web at a cost that a 6 to 10 man team can actually afford. So that's actually something we're working on right now. We're developing a product called Extractive, and our premise, or what we're trying to deliver here, is a fully semantic web through the grid. So we've got a fully on-demand architecture, which means it's more scalable. We have about 50,000 nodes in our grid. By some counts, we are either like in the top 10 or top 20 computing systems on the planet. But we can do that at a lower cost than what anyone else can do. We have better performance. We can look at 1 million pages in about a few minutes. So I would be surprised if anyone else can do that, aside from Google or something like that. And then we have a plug-and-play architecture, which allows us to do basically plug-in applications and sort of write codes that are sort of standalone apps, put that into the managing systems, and it just takes care of the rest. So our technology partners developed 3,500 semantic types, which lets us analyze way more things than anyone else can. But then we can do a whole bunch of other things like just relationship extraction, fact extraction, sentiment extraction, and do all these additional technologies just by plugging them into this grid system. And that's where the automated provisioning really helps. So that's what I mean by an old concept powering a new one. So the grid we found has commercial use for web crawling and semantic web applications. And we look at the cloud, we actually wouldn't be able to do any of this on the cloud. I mean, we could, but not to the extent that we're able to do it. So we would incur higher costs and would be less scalable in the cloud, which I think is surprising to a lot of people. So just to close, I would like people to start thinking, what else is there? The cloud is really great. I'm not questioning that at all, but the grid can be better in some cases. So I would encourage everyone here to sort of think about, well, the grid actually can be useful for commercial purposes. So we've done web crawling, we're working on semantic web stuff, but what else can there be? And then going forward, as we launch this extractive product, we're going to be questioning, what can we do, what can we see with all the data now that we have an entirely semantic web? So we think more aha moments are coming, and we're excited to see what those are. Thanks.